Needless to say, I was a little surprised at the legislation we'd be discussing this evening. And it's always been important to me, you know, I like to read the bills, so maybe not like to read, but I feel it's kind of a responsibility, and kind of been focused on the Democrat one. But the good news is I'd had a chance to see earlier versions of the Republican amendment before us, and I think I've got at least a fairly good feel, even if I'm not totally caught up. And I was actually very excited. Some of the structural reforms that are in there I think are absolutely critical, a breath of fresh air, part of the solution if we're going to turn things around here in this state. So, you know, I admit, frankly, I was one of the Democrats who was not prepared to vote for what would have been Senate Amendment A. I had vowed, for example, not to vote for a budget that included teacher pension sharing. I view that as potentially a path to which eventually municipalities will be writing checks to the state. That's not a place I thought we ought to go. And for that alone, I was not prepared to vote for what might have been the legislation before us. I also had concerns about some of the taxes that popped up at the last minute that hadn't had public hearings and really needed further scrutiny. And it was very hard for me to contemplate not supporting it because of the hard work a lot of people put into this. I had some personal interest, having been involved with several sections of the implementer that I think would have been very constructive and productive, and I hope eventually will find their way back into the budget. So I looked at what is before us today with great anticipation. And certainly my desire was to vote for what has been described as a bipartisan budget. Alas, I found things in this budget that I also have problems with. For example, the Citizens Election Program. To scrap the Citizens Election Program, in my opinion, is very poor policy. Not too long ago, we had a program that was the model for other states in this country for which we could be very proud. There are people here in this room, elected officials, who would not be here were it not for the Citizens Election Program. Yes, it had some flaws. Yes, we actually weakened it in some significant ways not long ago, which I voted against. But to jettison this program rather than to reform it, and there are logical reforms that could be put in place, is basically the death knell for any number of folks who would represent this state well from considering to participate and to become elected officials. And I would hope that we would certainly reconsider the prospect of eliminating a program that has been so successful for the state and for which for many years we were very proud. I also have reservations and concerns with regard to the savings that are proffered that count on concessions or changes to labor agreements starting in 2027. Reminds me a little bit of the Popeye story with Wimpy, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. I'm not sure we can truly encumber future legislatures, and I think it's problematic to assume as much as $140 million is really going to happen in that context. So I got a problem with that. And I've also never really been a fan of the transportation program, which I don't think is a sufficient solution given the depth of the crisis we face in transportation infrastructure. So I have a dilemma. I'm not really satisfied with this budget either. You know, I've never been a cockeyed optimist, but I still believe that we can have a consensus budget, not simply a technical bipartisan budget, but a true consensus budget that attracts lots of votes from both sides of the aisle, whether the governor likes it or not. Something that reflects the spirit and the intent of the legislation before us, but also incorporates many of the really strong policy components that were also part of the bill the Democrats have been proposing. That's the budget we need for Connecticut. And I implore and engage my colleagues to view this not as the end of any process, but as an opportunity for us to sit down together, put aside the politics, and really think about what's best for the state of Connecticut. I think we're actually pretty close to reaching consensus on any number of these things. But this budget is not it either, and unfortunately, I can't support it. Thank you very much.